I actually had a different plan for today's review, and it wasn't even a Transformer plan. We were going to go outside the robots in disguise. But after last night's live stream, I kind of felt that this was necessary. So instead, we're going to shift gears and talk about Masterpiece Bumblebee. First masterpiece I've talked about on this channel. This one is one that collectors never thought we would get because Volkswagen was so stubborn about letting Hasbro or Takara use their Beetle for war toys. You know, because it's Germany. But a slight shift in management and a lot of persistence from Takara, and we finally have this toy we never expected to have. As you can see, he is an old-school Volkswagen Beetle in a more realistic styling. This caused quite a contention. You have a Masterpiece Bumblebee coming out, but how do you do it? Do you make it represent the real-world car, because they kind of do that, or do you make it look like the one that you had as a kid, and that super squat version of the Beetle that we got to see in the cartoon? Ultimately, I'm happy with the decision to make it realistic. That makes it go in with the rest of the Masterpiece cars very well. In a lineup, no one looks out of place. While it does keep the robot mode from being as accurate as it can possibly be, I'm not unhappy with this decision, and though I know some who always will be. He's a nice shade of yellow. It's not the super bright type. There's just a nice, it's a goldenrod. Let's go with that. Nice shade of yellow. Dark enough to actually still show little subtle details like that, like the little vent on the hood. Very nice. Paint matching is actually pretty good. There's only a few, in a dim room you couldn't tell. It takes right now with the extra review lights on, I can see a difference between this piece and this, the hood, this piece and that piece. It's slight, but it is there. But, for the most part, pretty good for one of Takara's creations. The detailing itself is actually really nice. You can see a lot of the natural lines are molded in. This piece across the hood is all done up very nice with raised edges everywhere. Tiny, tiny, tiny details like that Volkswagen emblem. All painted in and molded and sculpted. Very, very crisp and nicely done. I like the headlights, little bits of translucent in there, and the turn signals. Very small, but fully painted. Nice, very nice. You can see one rear view mirror, none on the other side. That is accurate. We also have a little bit of paint there on the handle for the door. Fully painted rims, which again have the Volkswagen emblem molded in. And a lot of little grooves all across the backside. Lots of detail. Lots and lots of detail all over. Very accurate representation. Very happy with this. Now we can modify the look of this a little bit because he actually does have a spare tire cover you have over here. And actually I have something left out that I probably should have put in first. Because you see on the back side, if you have this piece attached, hang on. This is really why I should have had it done earlier, because this can go up. Hang on. There we go. You actually do have a piece on the back for what would be a license plate, if you so chose. And I'm sure Repro Labels has something for you that will fit. But if you don't want that, if you actually want the spare tire cover to be on there, the license plate panel, as I accidentally showed off early and out of order, actually can wedge inside, and then it's as simple as putting this where the license plate used to go. And now you have a spare tire. So a little bit different. Just a little bit of extra detail, just in case you want it. All well and good. Besides that, yeah, nice roll to it. And that's pretty much all there is to the vehicle mode. Extremely accurate, very nicely made. Amazing that we actually got a real Volkswagen Beetle that we never thought we would get. Now for the transformation, I almost hate to do this because It's something of an unwritten rule among me and my cohorts not to spoil certain elements of this transformation because it is actually really, really cool, but it wouldn't be a full review without it, so here we go. So we start off by getting these legs undone like so, which fold those out. Now a little bit of magic here. We can fold this down, and the midsection here will swallow up that entire piece of kibble. And it's nicely nested right there inside that midsection. That's a brilliant way of getting rid of a little bit of shell. Now, the legs themselves, all of that paneling, all the sides all fold up to make the legs nice and solid. Fold up the wheels. Alright, now for the rest. We have to unseat everything from here. Come on. Hang on. All that disconnects. All that panel folds down to form the sides of the robot. You can unpeg that. Goes all the way down. Have to rotate these arms around and fold these tiny little pieces to the back of the arms, where they are not so much of an eyesore. That lets us also get around to folding out the hands. At this point, we flip up the cover, revealing the Autobot symbol. Rotate this back piece down. And just like that, well, actually, that's more accurate. There we go. And just like that, we have Masterpiece Bumblebee in his full robot mode. Nice, simple transformation with, and even for its size as a Masterpiece toy, so many neat little tricks in order to deal with all that outer shell of the vehicle mode and still get us to something that looks quite a bit like the animation model. Now, the starting point here is this is fairly small for a Masterpiece toy, as you would expect from a Masterpiece Bumblebee. Just for a little bit of size example to show you, there is a normal kind of standard, mid 2000s deluxe on the right, and a full-size Masterpiece on the left. That's pretty much where your scale is, and that's about right for Bumblebee. Especially when you put him up against Optimus Prime, he starts looking about his short little size as possible. So that out of the way, we can get to what we always do, the zoom in on the face. Of course, that way you can get to see the profile shot of the little warrior. It's a joke for the stream. You had to be there to get it. Very nice detail going on. Head looks so accurate to the cartoon. I'm so in love with this look. Very nicely done. Very nice head sculpt. That is the Bumblebee I grew up with. That's the one I've always wanted a new toy of. Now, detail-wise, I think the most important part is the cheat to get the chest right. Of course, all the rear of the vehicle mode is stored as a shell on his back, because this is all of the rear section he had visible in the show. There's not really a way of recreating that without defying some law of physics, so I'm not upset with this compromise. It's how they had to get it in there, and for me, it works out fine. The remaining details are pretty standard. You've got things that, for a Masterpiece toy, look something like you'd see more on a deluxe, but at this size, you can kind of understand that. But we can see a lot of extra detail has been included, including, of course, the pelvis section, which we got a uncomfortable zoom in on. Again, you had to be there, or just, watch the stream archive when I post it in a week. We have it's not heavily detailed, and it's a G1 toy, so you really wouldn't expect it to be. But what is there is nice. It keeps the areas from looking too blank and upsetting. There's a few things that are going to nitpick at some people. For instance, a little bit of kibble hanging off the arms, which isn't really associated with Bumblebee. The big one is the big cavity that's left from unfolding the fist, whereas a different masterpiece would cover that up or have a panel of some kind. Yeah, this one not so much. Just because there's just not there's not a lot of room to work with on the figure. Like, I'm amazed it does everything it does do at this size. So that's pretty much, detail-wise, what we got from Bumblebee. He's nice and clean all around. I'm happy with how he is, and he's still built very solidly, even though he is small. For articulation, the head does rotate as well as tilt up and down, so you have some expression you can get out of that. Fully ball-jointed shoulders, cut very nicely, give plenty of room. The bicep swivel works quite well as a 90-degree elbow. No wrist swivel because it has to hinge out, and no opening fist, which is something most Masterpiece toys don't leave out. Though there actually is a little bit of molding in the hand to actually match. Like, you can see where the pin would be for hinged hands. So it's kind of funny to me that they made him match the others that way. He has a waist rotation. Always happy to see those. Fully universal at the thigh. There's also a thigh swivel. A nice 90-degree knee bend. As well as ankles that rock in all directions. He's quite an articulated little bug. I'm thrilled with that. But that's not all. He does have other tricks because, well, this is the Masterpiece line, and he'd look pretty scrawny as a figure if he didn't have at least a little bit extra. For starters, he does get something to arm himself. It's just a simple little blaster he was seen with in the show, so we can go ahead and let him hold on to that, just so he's got a little bit of defense against Decepticons. And granted, when he's this size, I don't think you can call him much of a war toy, can you? So maybe that was a compromise. However, the more important trick is he actually has an alternate face, something that's not as commonly done. For this, you had to pull off the current face in order to stick the other one on. It's two long pegs that keep the face attached. And they do leave you a little bit of room for your fingernail here at the top of the head in order to get them swapped. So that was a nice touch. If we can zoom in, it's a happy Bumblebee. This is generally how I leave him because, well, it's Bumblebee, He should be nice and happy looking. So that's another nice feature as well. Of course, you also have this thing on the back that can be removed if you don't like it. But that actually, the whole reason that is there is because G1 Bumblebee's animation model did have a circle like that on his back. So, which is kind of a clever way of actually drawing it out as a real detail from the vehicle. For the toy itself, that's what we got. But Masterpiece Bumblebee was not packed in by himself. We actually have another figure to talk about. And for that, we have to look at the Exosuit. Yep. It was a 2-pack because he is a small Masterpiece, so they bulked him up a little bit. This is the Exosuit we saw in Transformers the movie, and periodically through Season 3 when the humans needed to come on a mission and didn't feel like getting squished. Now, there's something of some contention about who it is, because it gets a little bit muddled. On the Transformers Masterpiece official guidebook, this is Daniel. On the back of Bumblebee's box, this is Spike. In the instructions, it just says Exosuit. So it's kind of left a little bit ambiguous as to which Witwiki we have. Now, I will say the sculpting, I will admit, leans more toward Daniel. However, I'm more inclined to think of it as Spike because that's who Bumblebee was known to be with. Especially when you're talking about Transformers the movie. All their scenes were together when Spike was in this Exosuit. So I kind of go with that, just for, also, so I don't own So I don't own a Daniel Witwicky toy, because I really don't want to have to burn any of my toys, no matter what. As action figures go, he is mostly a bonus, though a lot of the details are done pretty well. There's a few things that are a little bit shrunken down, like this little raised area on the chest isn't as pronounced, but you know they're working with a budget here, and this is supposed to be just a bonus, so I can forgive a lot of the downsides of this thing. But aside from the head, you can see the molding is pretty simple. Again, we are dealing with G1 era look, so a lot of it is accurate, but it is flattened out a little bit. On the arms especially, you can see where they worked in a little bit of the detail from the movie, where you do have some fists molded in and fully painted, and some guns hanging off. Now, the arms don't transform into that gun mode that we saw in the movie, though if you want to pretend, that's the big guns that Daniel was firing, that's up to you. Now, typically, I would have shown you this in vehicle mode, because this does transform. However, like Bumblebee, there's a moment that's magical in this transformation, so I kind of wanted you to see it for yourself. Though I guess first off, we need to show articulation. The up and down hinge on the arm, there's no ball joint there, so he actually gets very limited articulation there. Ball jointed elbow, so at least it rotates all the way around. Ball jointed hips with panels that fold out of the way, so you have more room to work with. Very restricted knee, unfortunate, and that's about it. Aside from the head being able to tilt up, but that's more or less for the transformation, which now we get to go to. So we're going to start by folding these feet up, which allow us to fold the wheels out from the lower leg, forming them on the side, and then the feet all fold back to create something a little bit smoother, and then these can rotate down. And that's pretty much ready to be, folded in and closed up on the peg. Close up on the peg. Close up. There we go. Now is where it gets a little bit weird. So we're going to lower this piece and then flip these out. And from here, yeah, it still kind of looks like an exosuit. It's still, it still pretty much looks like, your human rider's in there just fine, he's kind of scrunched down in this little core section, controlling it from the inside, and everything's nice. And oh my god, he's just a head. He's a head in the spinal column. Oh my god, now I kind of wish it was Daniel. This is just like, this was freaky when you first saw this. Like this was a little bit freaky because, it's very bizarre. It's a really bizarre design choice. Like for most of this transformation, you can kind of see how it works. Like you can kind of see like how a human is riding inside there, and how he fits inside of all of this, despite it transforming and changing shape all over the place. But then you get to that part, and it's just all falls apart. And oh yeah, I was wondering why this wasn't working, and I haven't finished transforming yet. I'm too busy being horrified at Spinal Column Daniel, or Spike, or whatever. Ugh, you're at this point. This is creepy. Yeah, the wheels have to be folded out. That allows you to fully get these down flush. They have peg holes right there. That folds down. And there you have the exosuit in its little vehicle mode, if you can actually call this a vehicle, as it looks more like a skateboard that Bumblebee should be able to ride on. It's a nice little bonus. Like, I will say, it is a bonus. Like, it is not meant to be taken as a masterpiece toy, much less just a really big accessory to one. But you can see they did try and give it some effort. You got some booster engines on the back, which were also there in the robot mode. I should have shown that. And you got the blasters are still pointed forward. The wheels are there, all fully working. But it is a very basic figure. Just enough to actually work as an exosuit toy. It's got some inaccuracies. I would have preferred a little bit of white paint on the helmet in order to actually get to look correct. You know, there's not much paint on this to be sure anywhere. But it's a nice little thing they included. And hey, I know a lot of people that wanted an exosuit figure. So now here's a masterpiece one. So how can you go wrong? other than weird spinal torso thing. Ugh. So that's Masterpiece Bumblebee in its entirety. A little bit less expensive than your standard Masterpieces because of the size, but I do like the idea of having both figures, Spike, as I'm pretending he is, and Bumblebee, together, as it should be. I am such a fan. Like, it is a really good toy. Like, it's very small for a Masterpiece, and it's gonna playing with it reminds you more of a smallish deluxe. But I do think the transformation elements, as well as just the really good attention to detail on the sculpt in both modes, really does maintain the masterpiece aesthetic, and it really does make him worthy of that title. So I'm perfectly happy with calling this a masterpiece of a figure. And now I leave you with only a handful of people knowing what that big zoom in on the crotch was all about. And you won't know for a week. Have fun with that.